Travis Wayne Goodsell. I've finished the first draft of the second amended complaint. Since no natural occurring event occurred or any other man-made event occurred to cause an exodus on the last day of when the scriptures said an exodus would occur in the future. So, nonetheless, I press on. Just a little discouraged that this will most likely be in vain, just like all the other complaints, as they obviously don't want this complaint to go through, and the evidence presented, and etc. So, nonetheless, this will be the reading. I added in the corporate structure part, as I went over it, I added the sentence, "This corporate structure is exactly the same as America's criminal organization." So, nature of the case. I've rewritten the whole thing. This is under a completely different tactic. So, I'll read the whole thing for you. It's 16 pages. So, hang on. This is going to be long. As the plaintiff has been trying to file federal complaints and following the civil court pro se litigant guide for cases 219 CV 00711 and 220 CV 00633, the defense counsel and the judges in both cases have been gaslighting the plaintiff with claims that the plaintiff fails to state a claim upon which relief may be granted. If the guide is correct, then the federal judges and the defense counsel are not just wrong, but in violation of the law. If the guide is incorrect, then the federal judges and the clerks of the court are in violation of the law for intentionally leading the plaintiff into a no-win situation against his First Amendment rights. The defense counsel and federal judges systemically claim the plaintiff must present evidence prematurely before an evidentiary hearing, and claim the plaintiff's case is frivolous and full of conspiracy theories, put it in quotes. The defense counsel is obviously mistaken by using America's enemies' misinformation and disinformation tactic of creating incorrect definitions of popular words and terms so as to cause confusion and a lack of trust in the truth. A conspiracy theory is a sound science-based argument about more than one person involved in crime with predictions about expected outcomes. As the defense counsel and the federal judges request and keep dismissing the plaintiff's complaints and motions, the evidence is not able to explain the conclusionary facts. Or the conclusionary facts. The plaintiff's evidence is not able to be presented to explain the conclusionary facts. The defense counsel keeps referring to Rule 8 as if the federal guide is incorrect, even using the word frivolous, and yet the defense counsel have never followed Rule 8 for their response. Rule 8b, defenses, admissions, and denials. 1. In general, in responding to a pleading, a party must: A. State in short and plain terms its defenses to each claim asserted against it. And B, admit or deny the allegations asserted against it by an opposing party. 2. Denials responding to the substance. A denial must fairly respond to the substance of the allegation. As the defense counsel admits to being clueless to the plaintiff's claims, Rule 8 also provides a remedy, which the defense counsel is failing to follow, as they keep motioning for a dismissal with prejudice and constantly being awarded with by the federal judges. Rule 8, B5, lacking knowledge or information. A party that lacks knowledge or information sufficient to form a belief about the truth of an allegation must so state. And the statement has the effect of a denial. In effect, the defense counsel keeps failing to properly deny the plaintiff's counts, which Rule 8 also remedies. Rule 8, B6, effect of failing to deny an allegation. Other than one relating to the amount of damages is admitted, an allegation is admitted if a responsive pleading is required. Yes it is. And the allegation is not denied. If a responsive pleading is not required, an allegation is considered denied or avoided. That's not applicable. The plaintiff herein amends his complaint yet again and is making it very simple. It's kind of long, 16 pages, but simple, as it focuses on coronavirus, and I'll get to that. As Judge Jenkins included in his complaint, the plaintiff is not required to motion Judge Jenkins to recuse himself, as it is legally obvious, as it is for any and all federal judges who are affiliated with or compromised by the defendant as either soldiers or associates. Judge Jenkins being a planted soldier, the plaintiff will not play the compromised federal judges and the defense counsel's gaslighting game. Let's see, I need to reread that. As Judge Jenkins is included in this complaint, okay, and the defense counsel's gaslighting will continue to follow the federal civil pro se litigant guide, trusting that its format is in compliance with Rule 8A. The defense counsel will need to properly reply to this amended complaint and to each and every count in accordance with Rule 8, pending the assignment of a new federal judge. Who will not be affiliated with or compromised by the defendant. On 31 December 2019, China publicly announced the coronavirus outbreak, responding to an online viral leak by an ophthalmologist in China who contracted the virus from his patients and later died from it. On 9 January 2020, WHO announces the threat of coronavirus. On 20 January 2020, the CDC announced 3 U.S. airports to begin screening for coronavirus. On 21 January 2020, the CDC, see how I'm doing this differently this time? The CDC announced the first confirmed coronavirus case. On 31 January 2020, WHO announces coronavirus as a public health emergency. On 3 February 2020, the White House declares coronavirus a national public health emergency. On 25 February 2020, the CDC announces the coronavirus will become a pandemic. Oh, man. On 28 February 2020, the first coronavirus case patient came to Utah. On 9 March 2020, the Grand Princess cruise ship docks in Oakland, California with their remaining coronavirus patients. On 11 March 2020, WHO declared the coronavirus. Who? Who made who? Parlez-vous? The World Health Organization, if you haven't figured it out, WHO declared the coronavirus as a pandemic. On 13 March 2020, National Executive declares coronavirus. See, I will not call him by name. Declares coronavirus a national emergency. Travel ban declared for non-Americans from Europe. Official health professionals have defined the difference between quarantine and isolation required for responding to coronavirus. When a person tests positive for the virus, they must be quarantined at the hospital until 3 negative tests. Those who come in contact with one who tests positive are to be isolated from human interaction at home until test results are determined. When outbreaks occur, the place of the outbreak is to be quarantined with all those within the place of the outbreak. As the place of the outbreak expands, so too is the expansion of the quarantine of all those within. Levels of green, yellow, orange, and red are used to determine the threat level of the virus. Quarantines are not to be lifted until the person or the place of an outbreak return to level green. Mask wearing by the public is only when persons must leave isolation to come in contact with the public to attempt to lessen the likelihood of infecting others. It does not protect the mask wearer from infection from this airborne human transmitter. Alright, C, cause of action. There's where the controversy comes in, because they say Rule 8 says that I'm supposed to present evidence, not conspiracy theories. And so, here we go. Count 1. 18 USC 115. The whatever squiggly thing, 2381. Treason. During the plaintiff's complaint, 219 CV 00711, the defendant assisted in the attack on the United States in using coronavirus as a weapon of mass destruction with the intent to assassinate the plaintiff. At the same time, the defendant's CEO, Russell M. Nelson, is a medical doctor who took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm, and is the leader of a religious organization claiming to care for the sick and the afflicted as well. Quotes. On 29 January 2020, the defendant released a press statement announcing the donation of PPE to Shanghai, China. Pay attention, because this is 16 pages long. This does come up again under a different count. On 13 March 2020, the defendant announced staged closures of their operations, which also comes up in another count. In the defendant's April General Conference 2020, probably should put, the CEO confessed to having communicated with China back in January 2020 for the purpose of establishing a temple in Shanghai, China. See how it's going to all connect here? Quid pro quo, for the purpose of murder, to get gain. As the White House announced a public health emergency on 3 February 2020, and the plaintiff served the defendant on 27 February 2020 in case number 219 CV00711, the defendant's delayed and slow phase shutdown of operations announced on 13 March placed Mormons, Utahns, and the plaintiff in jeopardy. Especially when the defendant opened back up full operations without approval of a green level. Resulting in escalations of infections and deaths and an indefinite prolonging of the viral threat. On 20 December 2019, the defendant's presiding bishopric, released a video in response to a Mormon whistleblower, to the IRS, working for one of over a dozen of the defendant's investment companies, Ensign Peak Associates. In it, they discussed the reason for investing and saving money is for a rainy day. Apparently, a viral pandemic does not meet the criteria as a rainy day for the defendant. Count 2. 18 USC Part 1 Crimes Chapter 73 Obstruction of Evidence, the squiggly thing 1512 Tampering with a Victim, because the other ones don't apply. I'm not a witness. Well, I am a witness, but I'm the victim as I'm prosecuting the case, and so the other parts were left out. Similar to treason, it's sedition, treason, and subversive activities in the full title. During the plaintiff's complaint, 219 CV00711, the defendant assisted in the attack on the United States and using coronavirus as a weapon of mass destruction with the intent to assassinate the plaintiff for the purpose of tampering with the plaintiff's federal civil case against the defendant. The defendant's CEO, Russell M. Nelson, is a medical doctor who took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. I did a copy and paste for the first part. Is that the... Let's see. Okay, yeah. That one's for a different... This is tampering. The other one was assassination. The defendant's CEO took a Hippocratic oath, leader of a religion, taken afflicted. On 29 January 2020, the defendant released a press statement announcing the donation of PPE to Shanghai, China. On 13 March 2020, the defendant announced stage closures of their operations. On 13 March 2020, the plaintiffs listed defendant co-conspirator defendants co-conspirators, I think. Listed defendants co-conspirators in case 219 CV00711 threatened the plaintiff with a wrongful lease violation that turned into an attempted eviction of the plaintiff. In the defendant's April General Conference, the CEO confessed to having communicated with China back in January for the purpose of establishing a temple in China. As the White House announced a public health emergency on 3 February 2020, and the plaintiff served the defendant on 27 February 2020 in case number 219 CV00711, the defendant's delayed and slowed phased shutdown of operations announced on 13 March 2020 placed the plaintiff in jeopardy of life, liberty, and property to prevent the continuance of the plaintiff's case. Count 3. 18 U.S.C. 115, 2381, treason. During the plaintiff's complaint, this is the long one, guys. 219 CV00711, the defendant assisted in the attack on the United States in using coronavirus as a weapon of mass destruction with the intent to assassinate the plaintiff. The defendant's co-conspirators, Governor Gary Herbert and Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, are soldiers, i.e. Mormons, of the defendant placed in the Utah governor's office. On 23 January 2020, Governor Herbert activated Utah's Division of Emergency Management to monitor impacts of coronavirus. Here I am going over the whole chronology, guys. This in and of itself condemns Herbert and Cox. So I hope you haven't been voting for Cox by mail. On 29 January 2020, the Utah Department of Health activated the Department Operations Center to prepare for coronavirus. On 28 February 2020, the first coronavirus patient arrives in Utah. And I did a video that day. On 2 March 2020, Governor Herbert creates the Coronavirus Community Task Force led by Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. See? He's responsible too, Mormons. Hope you didn't vote for him. On 3 March 2020, a coronavirus phone hotline was started with 65,000 phone calls. 65,000. Pay attention to that number. Back on 3 March 2020. On 6 March 2020, Governor Herbert declares a state of emergency. On 12 March 2020, Governor Herbert recommends no gatherings of 100 or more persons to take effect on 16 March 2020. On 13 March 2020, Governor Herbert recommends a soft closure of K through 12 schools. On 17 March 2020, he tries to spoil my birthday. Like I'm going to have a party anyway. Governor Herbert orders the closure of restaurants and bars and limits gatherings to 10 people. On 22 March 2020, the first Utah death from coronavirus occurs. On 23 March 2020, Governor Herbert extends the shutdown of K-12 until 1st of May 2020. A website established for Utahns to learn about coronavirus through chat feature is established. Okay. On 24 March 2020, Governor Herbert begins Utah Leads Together task force to maintain the economy over Utahns' lives. You sure you want to vote for Cox? He cares more about the economy than he does for you, and you're going to vote for him? Seriously? Please. On 26 March 2020, the Utah Department of Health bans all non-emergency medical care of Utahns due to lack of PPE. Remember that donation Nelson gave? On 27 March 2020, Governor Herbert issues "Stay safe, stay home," with no method of compensating Utahns for lost wages and stay-at-home care and survival. And survival necessities. Let's see. You put on 1 April Fools 2020. The state website includes daily updates of coronavirus stats. Number of cases 1,012. Number tested 20,155. Number hospitalized 91. Number dead 7. It has been learned that many Utahns have contracted coronavirus and died, but because they were not tested, they were not counted on the stats. It also has been learned that Utahns who tested positive but did not require a ventilator were released to the public prematurely from quarantine, as Governor Herbert's financial extortion prevented both those who test positive and those who come in contact with those who tested positive from continuing to stay safe and stay home as a matter of survival. Are you sure you want Cox? On 4 April 2020, Utah's disaster declaration is presidentially approved. On 6th of April 2020, the idol god for Mormons' birthday is on that day. Not the real Jesus. I've gone over that. Mormons still don't understand it. Or the learning of the Jews' religion. The federal government were confiscating state-purchased PPE. Oh, there's that PPE again. On 9 April 2020, Governor Herbert issues a travel ban into Utah, requiring a new travel declaration form. On 15 April 2020, the governor announced the arrival of PPE purchased from Shanghai, China? Wait, wasn't that where Nelson donated free PPE to? Where the defendant donated PPE. Well, yep, sure enough. Was it back in January? Maybe we should put that. I won't worry about it. It's understood. The federal government subsequently confiscated the PPE. On 17 April 2020, the state acquired PPE from other sources. On 20 April 2020, a vulnerable populations advisory group is started. As a reminder, the plaintiff's 219 CV00711 explained how the defendant is responsible for getting the plaintiff labeled as a vulnerable adult in the state of Utah. To this date, no one has reached out to care for the plaintiff, other than to provide a certain amount of money from the benefits, which provides enough for a week. On 22 April 2020, Governor Herbert again changes the slogan to "Healthy Together." Keeps changing the slogan. I didn't put in the "Stay Strong" white supremacist thing because I didn't record the date of when that first occurred. I may have done the video on it, but good luck my trying to find it. On 24 April 2020, Governor Herbert finally forms a multicultural task force subcommittee. According to 2010 United States Census projections, the racial and ethnic makeup of Utah are as follows: 88.6% white or European, 2.8% Asian American, 1.8% American Indian and Alaskan Natives, 1.6% African American, 1.3% Pacific Islander, 6.9% some other race, alien from Kolob, and 13% Hispanic Latino. Notice 13%. And remember, what is this for? Multicultural Task Force Subcommittee. So it's those others than white. It's a discriminating task force, is what it is. I've gone over that video. The racial makeup of West Valley City was 65.37% white? It's lower than the state average. Interesting. And Hispanic or Latino of any race were 33.13% of the population, plus the other percentages. The defendant knows the address of the plaintiff. Does the plaintiff need to explain the significance of the delay in forming a multicultural subcommittee to make sure that those who are not white are being taken care of? On 28 April 2020, Governor Herbert and Spencer Cox, probably should put Lieutenant Governor, again changed the slogan to "A mask for every Utahn." The plaintiff reminds that in 219 CV 00711, the plaintiff's life was threatened by his landlord and property manager. The plaintiff had acquired hospital masks during that emergency event, and thus was prepared from the beginning of the viral pandemic in the event the plaintiff tested positive, referred to the nature of the case. You only wear a mask if you are testing positive and have to leave the home from isolation or quarantine. And technically, if you're testing positive, you're not supposed to be at home. You're supposed to be in the hospital, even if you are A negative or A positive, which means without positive test results or test symptoms. Asymptomatic, sorry. On 1 May 2020, the anniversary of the Illuminati, which the defense counsel believes is a conspiracy theory connection to their client, despite the carved in stone and in bronze evidence. Governor Herbert downgrades Utah to moderate risk and allowing the start of a phased reopening. It has been learned that the stats were suppressed and manipulated to maintain new cases to be kept under 200 per day to justify the reopening, rather than establishing the threat level by weekly percentages of new cases to those tested. Testing percentages to this date had been in testing percentages during this time had been in the yellow threat level, not green. I was thinking to date, in the March 1st date, which I could have worded it that way too. On 14 May 2020, assisted living facilities were added to the website stats in a separate page, but not included with the state stats. And remember, those not tested prior to, it's an assumed object of the sentence, were never counted on the stats. Out of the 101 assisted living facilities in Utah, the beginning stats were, notice how I slipped that in? Because we're over 500 now, which means they keep getting reinfected over and over again. Anyway, number of facilities, 97. Number of new cases, 183. This is when they first started posting the stats. Number of deaths, 30. And remember, that's only those who got tested, which means they didn't go in to test until they started seeing a number of dead people. I see dead people. Number of new cases of healthcare workers, 150. On 15 May 2020, Governor Herbert lowers the threat level to yellow. All clear! Which matched the percentage process they were supposed to be going by. So I do give them that. They correctly assigned the yellow coding for the percentages for the week, but that's not how they were doing it. Most of Utah was reopened as it signaled to Utahns that the coronavirus threat was over. That week, airport directors across the nation and in Utah were opposing national and state orders to reopen on this date. The Salt Lake Airport director was arrested, accused of child porn possession, allowing the Salt Lake Airport to open for the resuming of the defendant's missionary program, as well as the return of tourists to Utah. Randall Berg has never been heard from since, neither receiving due process. He's just gone. Governor Herbert also explained his intention of reopening was to get Utahns back to church. On 30 May 2020, Governor Herbert declared BLM protesters, Black Lives Matter, over the police public execution of an unarmed and in custody black man as domestic terrorists, and sent out the police in military transportation and weaponry to assault protesters, for which they were protesting. It has been learned that Governor Herbert takes sensitivity training, but it apparently is not working. I have no choice but to throw in these jabs. Hold on a second here. I've got to take a quick pause. Take care of this. Alrighty. That means we've done this for about 40 minutes now. Yep. What was I? Yeah, there's the Black Lives protesters. On 11 June 2020, under pressure from Kane County, Governor Herbert again violates health professionals' advice from the beginning and moves Kane County to green without an eradication of the coronavirus in the whole state. Because it's important to get rid of it from the whole state before you open up any of the counties. It's all or nothing, nobody. It's It's not complicated with the virus situation. Because once you open up one area, those in the closed areas, where do they want to go? To the open areas. Ta-da! And once you have that situation on a consistent basis, as you're not taking care of it, the quarantining properly, you're going to have an indefinite infection. Because it's going to just continue to rise until everybody in Utah is infected. And then they won't have any more new cases anymore, except for those who get reinfected. And so, yeah, we'll end up going over 3 million in our stats eventually, if this is allowed to continue. But again, why are you voting for Cox? You know, I did the video on my voting ballot and found out one of the guys running for governor is a medical doctor. Shouldn't we want him to be in charge of a coronavirus pandemic for our state? You know, he may be betraying us, but at least he's better than the one who's causing the problem. Alright. On 18 June 2020, Governor Herbert turns more counties to green as the weekly percentages rise to orange level. See what I mean? On 24 June 2020, after a worker in the governor's office tested positive, Governor Herbert orders mask wearing in state buildings. On 16 July 2020, a YouTube video was released showing how the stats were manipulated. I should put a Utah government YouTube video. Utah government YouTube video was released showing how the stats were manipulated, as previously explained. On 20 July 2020, Governor Herbert announces the schools can reopen in the fall if new case numbers can stay below 400 per day. Again, we're not green, and we're now in orange, and he says, oh, if we can maintain orange level, we'll open up school. Yeah, that'll be perfect, won't it? I'm sure we won't have outbreaks at school openings, will we? As we all know the answer to that. On 18 August 2020, Utah schools begin to open for fall semester. Teacher and parent protests have been going on since the 11th. On 21 August 2020, Governor Herbert renews his state of emergency declaration because it expired. Within 1 week, school virus infection outbreaks commence. Surprise, surprise. I don't know if anybody remembers the old, what's his name? Who was in the military base show. Surprise, 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 surprise. Can't remember his name. Old black and white show. I'm not going to remember. And I don't know how to look it up. School virus infection outbreaks commenced as predicted and warned about by health professionals from the beginning. The state of Utah entered into the red level and still rising to this current date. On 14 September 2020, anti-mask protests begin. Yay! in Utah, as late night comedy makes jokes of Utah's absurd reasoning. And I'm being nice in this statement. Oh dear God, you had an elderly woman talking the wildest, wackiest stuff to justify not wearing a mask. Oh dear God. And national press exposes Utah's absurdity as news fact. By refusing to follow professional health advice, Governor Herbert and Lieutenant Governor Cox refused to protect the lives of Utahns and the plaintiff, being more concerned about maintaining the economy, especially of that of the defendant. Testing practices were corrupted. Let's see. Do I need to put in? I'm betting I does. Dues? No, treason. Oh, okay. Did I not have one for... I wonder if I should make this interference of the case, and I think I will. By refusing to follow refused and life of Utahns and the plaintiff, as well as interfering in the plaintiff's case against the defendant as Governor Herbert's publicly expressed reasoning was to allow the defendant to resume operations by refusing to follow professional health advice. Governor Herbert and Lieutenant Governor Cox refused to protect the lives of Utahns and the plaintiff, as well as interfering in the plaintiff's case against the defendant, as Governor Herbert's publicly expressed reasoning was to allow the defendant to resume operations, being more concerned about maintaining the economy and the economy for the defendant especially of that of the defendant. Okay, I already had it. Alright, so then we'll I need to yes I do. Alright, so let's find a tampering there we go. Copy. That's 3, right? I think my original intention was to do one for treason, one for tampering, but we'll stick this as tampering. So that the church is the only one actually committing treason, and the judges and the defense counsel, whereas everybody else is is involved in tampering in support of the treason. And there's late night comedy. There's count 4. Judges first, Oberg, Waddups, and Waddups from the plaintiff's 219 CV 00711 all failed to recognize the Federal Civil Pro Se Litigant Guide with first non-response, Oberg's recommendation for dismissal with prejudice, and Waddup's order for dismissal with prejudice based upon a wrongful interpretation of Rule 8A. In so doing, the defendant got away with their crimes committed against the plaintiff. Judge Jenkins, in this case, that should be a new paragraph, refused to recuse himself, as Judge Barlow did, with the intent to likewise violate the Federal Civil Pro Se Litigant Guide for an illegal interpretation of Rule 8A, and ignoring the defense counsel's violation of Rule 8B, to aid and abet the defendant in covering up their crimes against the defendant. Judge Jenkins is still refusing to recuse himself in defiance of the law, as it is necessary for the assignment of a new judge, who is not affiliated with or compromised to the defendant. Alright. And so on this one, it'll be under the judge in the front page motion, amended complaint page, where it says judge, and I'll be putting yet to be assigned, to be newly assigned, or something like that. Count 5. This is with tampering with the victim, obstruction of evidence. As submitted in the ordered amended complaint, the plaintiff presented a signed confession of guilt for tampering with the plaintiff's case 219 CV 00711 and an admission of intent to commit further crimes against the plaintiff by co-conspirator in both cases, Samantha Hansen, property manager of Danville Development for landlord Valley Behavioral Health. In 219 CV 00711, the plaintiff connected the defendant with Valley Behavioral Health and thus Danville Development. But as the need for count 4, the plaintiff was criminally denied justice in that case. Count 6. This is the last count. And this is tampering with the victim again. Defense counsel Swen Swenson and Taylor Hadfield, having been educated in law, degreed in law, passed the bar, are licensed to practice law, and hired with a law firm, constantly and systematically filed motions to dismiss with prejudice, prematurely and frivolously, in violation of law, by misinterpreting rule, purposely misinterpreting Rule 8A. Misinterpreting Rule 8A to violate their responsibility in Rule 8B to hold in contempt the Federal Civil Pro Se Litigant Guide and thus the whole federal court system. Their intent is to prevent the plaintiff from presenting evidence against their client, which is their tell that the plaintiff's evidence is damning to the defendant, as they claim ignorance of the factual clues the plaintiff allows the defendant to know. Allows the defendant to know the plaintiff knows by calling them conspiracy theories under the wrong definition. Okay, so, well, let's see if we can make this 16 pages again without Alrighty, so then the injury, again, it contains a lot of the same. There's a few changes here and there. I added in, the plaintiff had believed he was confirming the validity of Mormonism, yet the defendant from the beginning labeled him a troublemaker. To attempt to explain away the confirmation by the plaintiff, the defendant posted online in 2011 gospel topics essays, one of which is Translation and Historicity of the Book of Abraham. As a consequence, Mormon membership activity dropped by 11 million for the defendant, denying Joseph Smith is a translator. 11 million for the defendant, who denied. Who denied Joseph Smith as a translator by referring to him as just a revelator, and now trying to indirectly murder the plaintiff with a viral weapon to silence the truth. As the defendant is fraudulently representing, okay. So, I had to throw, well, I still haven't connected it to me. As a response to explain away the plaintiff's confirmation of Joseph Smith as a translator. Yeah, we need to reword this. Let's see. In 2011, the defendant posted online on their website gospel topics essays, one of which as a response to explain away the plaintiff's confirmation of Joseph Smith as a translator. By claiming he was just a revelator. As a consequence, Mormon membership activity dropped by 11 million for the defendant. We don't need any of the rest of this. As a consequence, in attempting to suppress the truth, Mormon membership activity dropped by 11 million for the defendant. Alrighty. Oh yeah, I gotta read you this part too. Ignorant Mormons of the defendant's use of coded speech resulted in brainwashing where Mormons will commit crime to defend the defendant's crimes, even committed against Mormons. Mormons who follow the prophet and his covenant path are winding up dead, sick, and infecting others, resulted in getting them sick and dead. The influence and control now. Consequences of following the defendant leads to, our death. Rather than lives saved. Consequences of following the defendant are death rather than lives saved. Okay, so it ends up being 17. So we'll not worry about that. And we'll bump down request for relief to the next page. Alrighty. And my request for relief is vesting of title.